Hi guys, today we are giving a free crash course on decoloniality to Prakhar Gupta and to some extent to Kushal Mehra as well. Hi guys, today I'm going to talk about two YouTubers, Kushal Mehra and Prakhar Gupta. Kushal Mehra's podcast is called the Charvaka podcast and Prakhar Gupta's is called Prakhar Ke Pravachan. So I don't follow Prakhar personally, but all I know is that he had got into some controversy a few days back because he criticized Sandeep Maheshwari for being too political. When Sandeep Maheshwari responded to a fan's question that all religions are equally bad or something like that, and Sandeep Maheshwari said that religions tend to become bad only when they think that other religions are not as good as them and they go around controlling people or forcing people to convert, which is the exact opposite of dharma. And what I know of Prakhar Gupta is from his podcast yesterday on Kushal Mehra's podcast called the Charvaka podcast. Now, I don't want to be too harsh on Prakhar because he is just a kid. He's about 26 or 27 years old. He's much younger than me. And but he made a lot of lame and stupid points. But I won't hate him because after all, he has a lot of things and ideas that I do agree with. So, and my qualm with Kushal Mehra is that I am a huge fan of Kushal Mehra. I'm a huge fan of his podcast. Some of his episodes on which are purely scholarly, purely educational, with Abhijit Iyer Mitra, multiple times with koenraad elst, Dr. koenraad elst and Shrikantji Talageri on the linguistic debunking of the Aryan invasion theory. Those episodes are pure gold, and Kushal Mehra deserves the highest amount of respect and condonation because he does not care about views. For so many months I've been seeing his subscriber base grow about only 5,000 subscribers, and he has hardly 20 to 30,000 views on those best scholarly episodes. But Kushal Mehra has a very funny and interesting problem that he will not listen to any arguments from the school of thought called decoloniality. He says decoloniality in itself is a form of coloniality. That's a very cool phrase to say. But the problem is, I have noticed that Kushal Mehra himself has a very decolonialized mind, which is probably why he doesn't see the value in Deepak propagating and talking about these principles. Even in today's video, which I'm going to analyze and criticize, he will make countless points you will see that are 90% of what exactly Deepak says. And so I've been meaning to write up an essay or something or an article or make a video on Kushal Mehra's misconceptions about decoloniality for some months now. And I thought they would have a debate or something both with Abhijit Mehra and Kushal Mehra, Abhijit Iyer Mitra and Kushal Mehra hating the idea of decoloniality and calling them communists or something. Abhijit Iyer Mitra has said that when you hear people talking about decoloniality, it exactly sounds to him like the Communist Manifesto. So what I've understood from their conversations and points is that they have not read the book India That Is Bharat by Deepak. So my point is that if you are talking on a subject, why won't you read the only book written on that subject by one person from your own country? Why would it's like, so if you are in a school and you study history and you don't read your history textbook and discuss everything else, that's kind of weird. And that is what Kushal Mehra does all the time, and that's what they got into a lot of even in this episode with Prakhar Gupta. So let's see what weird things they say and how they contradict themselves, what they said 2 minutes back, and how they do have some degree of decoloniality in their minds, but they hate people who talk about decoloniality, and why they should read the book India That Is Bharat by Deepak.
मैं पता है, मैंने जब छोटा होता था तो व्हेन आई वुड वेक अप स्कूल के लिए मम्मी ना जगजीत सिंह का हरे कृष्णा हरे रामा चलाती थी। इसमें पीछे सितार बज रहा होता है। तो अब ना मेरी आदत पड़ गई है, सुबह उठते अगर जब मैं सितार सुनता हूँ ना, एक अलग ही माहौल बन जाता है।
I showed you that clip to give you a basic sense of what Prakhar Gupta is like. See already that he has kind of a decolonialized mind. He acknowledges that these chants and these so-called religious Hindu things do give him a certain sense of peace, even after all these years.
I'm not going to play by your rules. Maybe I come to the idea and I play by your rules by myself, but I will evaluate the situation independently. Khud se. I'm not going to surrender to the crowds very easily. That is how I think about stuff in my private life.
So their topic of discussion was contours of nationalism, and Prakhar starts off with this point describing how he's a very staunch individualist as opposed to someone who would think of only social harmony. So the basic question that has been addressed by J. Sai Deepak multiple times as well, and is kind of J. Sai Deepak's qualm with the American type conservatives and free market lovers and libertarians in India, is that do we sacrifice individuality for the greater good like China? Or do we sacrifice a greater good for individuality for some hypothetical, completely individualistic society, which does not exist in reality?
So when I think of nationalism and patriotism, although I might have a little bit of a confusion as to how to separate those two also, because they sound so similar in application, I think of it as, what are my terms? What does a nation mean to me? And I keep bumping across this obstacle. Kushal bhai, help me resolve this. For me, nationalism, or what is it that fills the vessel of nationalism, is stuff that I've learned in the history of myself. जो मेरा experience है, which is surrounded by say people in Faridabad in Delhi, which is where I lived, right? जो उनकी histories थी जिससे उन्होंने मेरे को कुछ दिया. So I find myself being more community oriented and more history oriented, personal history oriented in my nationalism and patriotism, as opposed to what is commonly understood as nationalism and patriotism.
Look at that. They have already harped on the core theme of J. Sai Deepak's entire argument on decoloniality. Not just J. Sai Deepak, the entire school of thought called decoloniality, that lived experience. That's the academic term for exactly what Prakhar is saying. He's talking about his lived experience and not what someone else tells you that this is nationalism, therefore love it, or this is nationalism, therefore hate it. He's already showing signs of decoloniality. And knowingly or unknowingly, he strikes the distinction between European style nationalism versus what we have is essentially civilizationalism. And that is an exact quote from J. Sai Deepak in his debate with Dr. Shashi Tharoor. He says that nationalism is a Western concept. It's an ethnocentric European construct. Why are you accusing me of being a nationalist? I'm not a nationalist in that sense.
My audience is 18, 19, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, 24-year-olds. And it makes me wonder, why is it that a 22, 23-year-old needs the crutch of nationalism to establish identity?
What does this point even mean? Crutch of nationalism to establish identity. He just explained that he consciously or subconsciously understands that there is a difference between European style nationalism and Bharatiya civilizational reawakening consciousness. He's already conflating European style nationalism with Bharatiya identity. If you know that European nationalism is different, why would you accuse nationalism of being the identity of the 20-year-old follower of yours who is writing he's a staunch nationalist? You have to know or realize that the nationalism he means when he says that he's a staunch nationalist is that he's a staunch civilizationalist. It's just that when the British came to India, whatever little stock of words they had, they thrust it upon the Bharatiya concepts of dharma and our systems of polity. And therefore, we are stuck with those words. That's why we are using this term called nationalism. Our dharmic Bharatiya civilizational state is now existent in this structure called India, which is a colonial construct and is this nation. But this nation is not the end all be all. This nation that we know here is not the starting point of our nationalism. Our starting point of our nationalism, it can't be called nationalism because it's not a goddamn nation. We are talking about a civilization here that started 6 to 7,000 years ago at least. What has that got to do with nationalism, and why are you criticizing it as if it's European style nationalism? When you just explained, when you just gave the hint that you understand that there's a difference.
And my fear with that is, I'm not sure, my fear with that is because the economic prospects, which is the adventure in the capitalist world outside, they're dwindling so massively, we need cultural artifacts to hold ourselves stable and sane.
Okay, so economically prosperous nations don't have a civilizational or cultural identity or a religious identity or even a racial identity. Saudi Arabia is a prosperous country. They have a religious identity. There is a strong civilizational and Renaissance style Enlightenment era Christian civilization identity of USA. France has a very strong French identity, which is why they have the balls to treat and handle the way they do their Islamic problems.
And that makes me wonder whether this entire guise of nationalism that has erupted in India over the last so many years is some sort of a cover-up for compliance.
Okay, here he gives out the spoiler that he essentially is just another English medium educated mid-20s kid who has nearly zero idea of Indian history, and that's why he thinks that this civilizational awakening is happening over only the last 5 or 6 years. You have to understand, Prakhar Gupta and people like you, and even people like me, because I was the same kind of guy when I was 25 and 26, that we are only seeing these things now. These are visible now more because of a certain political party being in power and because of internet. If the internet had existed when Sitaram Goel was writing book after book, you have no idea what you would see today. No, you have no idea what a civilizational reawakening that would have had happened already if those people, if R.C. Majumdar, Jadunath Sarkar, Sitaram Goel, if these guys had YouTube channels. You have to know their history. You have to know what our history of resistance is. You have to know that there have been magnitudes and degrees of what kind of resistance we have done. Sometimes we have gone full high, sometimes we have gone a little, chalo, what can we do? This is the way. Sometimes we have been Gandhians. And now we are again going a bit high. But this is not an out of the blue, completely newborn phenomenon. This resistance has always been there. Now you are seeing it more because of the internet. So don't talk down to it like it's just a sudden random phase that has come to a youngster's mind.
The biggest mistake that I find that is happening across the world in the global discourse is, again, I coined this word called Abrahamic privilege. Is because the world is privileged and world is looked at from an Abrahamic lens. इन्होंने last 1000 साल 1500 साल में ना इन्होंने एक बड़े तबके के ऊपर राज किया है दुनिया के. Not only physically, even epistemically. एपिस्टेमिक राज बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होता है. आपका फिजिकल राज तो होता ही है. एक बार फिजिकल राज तो चले जाता है, ठीक है. अंग्रेज चले गए 1947 में चले गए,
राइट.
मगर अंग्रेजियत नहीं गई. और मुझे अंग्रेजी भाषा से कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. आई कंडक्ट दिस पॉडकास्ट बेसिकली इन इंग्लिश, बट व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू से इज एपिस्टेमिक जो रूल होता है ना, नॉट दैट एवरी वेस्टर्न आइडिया इज बैड. आई लाइक मेनी वेस्टर्न आइडियाज, बट द पॉइंट इज, लाइक यू सेड, आई चूज इट ऑन माय टर्म्स.
Remember, this guy hates decoloniality. He's talking about, he's basically, it seems like he's reading out a page from India that is Bharat. And when he says, notice that when he says that I have no problem with English, I'm speaking in English, even that is exactly what Jai Deepak says. Jai Deepak is not for looking and doing exactly the things we were doing in a Cautillian state. This is what proves to me that Kushal Mehra has not read the book by Jai Deepak, because Jai Deepak keeps mentioning this word in multiple interviews and speeches and talks, and even in his book, that what Jai Deepak is recommending or is hoping happens is a hybrid future for Bharat. And this is what Kushal Mehra is also talking about.
Adding to the list of things that you said that a regular nationalist in India sort of wants, one of the other things is an acknowledgement of the depth of our cultural history. Right? That, well, we have a default inferiority complex. We've not been able to rid ourselves for the last 75 years since we got independent and such, and like...
Okay, Prakhar, how did that inferiority come about? Did it happen because of magic? Did it randomly happen, like that 5-year-old nationalism you're talking about? Are you aware of what caused these inferiority complexes? The layer upon layer upon layer of coloniality and Nehruism that has led to this inferiority complex. Are you ready to criticize those? Or are you going to only criticize the symptom and not the root cause?
More likely than not, and I do not want to say always here, but more likely than not, they refer to India in its historical form.
Okay, why shouldn't we? Back then we were a civilizational state who gave Rome a run for their money. We had the best universities. We were the home for all the refugees of the world. We were the best. We were at the top. Why shouldn't we refer to that?
Why do I have to be proud of something that no longer exists? My difference with the nationalists begin there.
Well, firstly, because it was better. Secondly, because it was your ancestors. It was my ancestors. It was your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather and grandmother who had contributed in some way or the other in setting up the greatest civilization in the history of the human race. That's why we should be proud of it. And when you acknowledge that your past was great, you knowingly or unknowingly automatically acknowledge that you do have the potential to be as great as the past again. Because your ancestors were not aliens or magical beings who had randomly out of the blue created the greatest civilization in the world. They had some potentials in them which we also possess in us. Remember a moment back he was criticizing the fact that Indians have inferiority complex. And when Indians who don't have inferiority complex and are proud of their past, he also has a problem with that. Now here he shows a very clear problem that I think all English medium educated children and kids of both the Marxist school of thought and the libertarian school of thought, both of them have. That is what I was talking about Shekhar Gupta as well, that he is part of this crowd who think India's past or culture and history and dharma, they have absolutely zero significance in shaping of the future of Bharat or even the current or the present of Bharat. They think either Karl Marx is the fount of everything and is the creator of all things, or Milton Friedman. Libertarians think Milton Friedman. Now, I am in many libertarian groups of India, and I see them talking about this and making fun of India's culture and India all the time, that they think economic prosperity comes out of the blue. Economic prosperity happens just because one fine morning randomly someone conjures up the idea of free markets, and from then on we have economic prosperity from here to eternity. There will always be these articles floating around the internet where some scientist or some BJP leader has said that this particular theory of mathematics has Vedic roots, or this particular theory of science existed in the past in Bharat. Now, we don't know, I personally don't know how much of that is true, because I'm not an expert on science, nor am I an expert on Rig Veda. I know a little of both of them. But what gives you this idea that nothing has Vedic roots? Maybe we did not have a Pushpak Viman which could drop atom bombs. But why are you under this notion that absolutely nothing has Vedic roots? The moment you talk about something originating in Bharat, both Marxists and English medium educated libertarians shit their pants.
I'm happy to be a nationalist. I'm happy to scream the name of India, which I do, by the way. People have seen that. I'm happy to scream the name of India, the languages of India. I'm happy to sing the national anthem. But let's make something that we are proud of first.
Then why are you proud of India? Why are you happy to be a nationalist? Why are you happy to scream the name of your country? And just like you contradict yourself 1 second after you said something, you are Ghazni, you mentioned that let's make something that we are proud of first, implying that we don't have anything to be proud of as yet. Then why are you proud of being Indian? Why are you screaming the name of your country?
Where I've been marginalized and sidelined by some invisible force for the last 75 years, all the while that I've been awake. And what is the word for it? Self-identified. All this while that I've been me, I've been by default inferiorized.
So here he again criticizes this inferiority complex of Indians and pretending that there's somehow a magical hand that has kept us inferiorized or given us this inferiority complex, because he does not have the balls to criticize what or who created this inferiority complex among us. There are no magical things that have created these problems. All of India's problems, somehow or the other, can be traced to either Jawaharlal Nehru or Mahatma Gandhi or to Abrahamic faiths. You don't have the balls to say that. You don't have the balls to criticize the real criminals, the real villains in this story, and you'll act like this story's bad things in the story happen magically, and that somehow the victim is supposed to be blamed for having that inferiority complex, and somehow also claiming to be a nationalist who is proud to scream his country's name.
I'm compensating with very small increments. जो वो master stroke वाली tendency है, ये तो master stroke ही होगा कोई. It is coming from a place where I want something tangible to be proud of in the now, or I keep referring to the ambiguous past.
Assuming that there is nothing to be tangibly proud of right now, he is essentially talking about free markets, where I am 100% in support of his view there. But he thinks that free market can be brought like that in India. Why does he think that? How less does he know about Indian culture? How less does he know the ingrained socialism among Indians that has been brought about because of Nehruism? From 1947 up till 1991, India was an economic shithole because of Nehru and PC Mahalanobis and Indira Gandhi. And how have these problems come about? What is he talking about? He somehow expects Narendra Modi to turn the entire country a free market heaven in 4 years or 8 years. How is that supposed to happen? And assuming that Narendra Modi is not doing it, is he not doing those things? Is he not trying to do those things? Is he not getting scuffled? Are his best economic policies not getting blocked by the people opposing Narendra Modi? And who is blocking those policies, Prakhar? Who is blocking them? The people who hate nationalism, people who are Marxists, people probably mostly on your side. Now, from the things he said on economics, I understood that he has a firm grasp on economics and free market capitalism. But why doesn't he know that these things take time? Does it happen overnight? Don't you have to put in policies in place that will bloom in the future? Does he not know that such policies are such nuts and bolts changes and reforms are being done every day almost? Does he not know that there's Sanjeev Sanyal, there's Vivek Debroy? So he essentially has absolutely zero homework on Indian government's policies, but he will sit on his chair and expect results overnight. He's essentially comparing this 75-year-old India, 75-year-old socialist shithole India, with a 200-year-old USA. He thinks what George Washington started when he freed the country, all the modifications, all the thought processes, all the ideas of economics that have evolved in Americans from 1776, he wants that to happen among Indians from 2014 to 2022. And are you saying that Narendra Modi should have absolutely beaten up all the peaceful protesters and non-peaceful protesters, shot them and ignored everything all the opposition says and rammed all these free market policies down everyone's throats? Would you have supported that then? And let me remind you of human behavior. Living in a free market society is absolutely different from living in a socialist society. So, if you are comparing yourself to Americans or comparing India to Americans, do you think a country that has seen, the people that have seen free market from 1776 are the same as the people who have seen socialism from 1947 to 2022 and absolutely no free market even before that? Do you expect the behavior of people to change overnight from 2014 in 7 years? Do you think the personality and daily life and habitual traits required by a person to live in a free market society, do you think those exist in an Indian? Some Indians do have those tendencies, which is why so many NRIs succeed and reach the top. And then there are so many NRIs who come back, and there are so many NRIs who don't succeed, or there are varying degrees of successes. What gives you the impression that entire India is ready for free market overnight? What is giving you this idea that if we just copy-paste the Constitution of America on the Indian Constitution, overnight things are going to be different and people are going to adjust it just like that?
और उस ambiguous past की reference में सबसे key feature क्या है?
अरे भाई तेरा past ambiguous नहीं है, तेरा चूतिया history syllabus ambiguous है, which is why you think your past is ambiguous. Let me tell you a story, because I am trying as hard as I can to avoid being too harsh on him and criticize him, because he is just a 26-year-old kid. Let me tell you what I was when I was 26 or 27. So that in 2018 or 19, a few students from Jadavpur University, long time pass outs, that 35-year-old graduate and PhD kind of things. So they went and blackfaced and threw ink at the statue of Shyama Prasad Mukherjee in a place in Kolkata. I was vehemently in support of that. I loudly and vociferously argued with my mother, and even though my entire family is communist, I had to argue with them that no, what they did was a great thing. Why my exact quote, I'm quoting myself, that my exact statement was, why shouldn't he blackface Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, because he's a Hindu fascist? And my mother was like, what are you saying? Why are you saying it that way? Even though my entire family is communist, they still have that sense in my past generation that because of Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, we are probably alive. Or if not, at least we are Hindus, at least we are safe. They have that inherent sense without consciously acknowledging it or talking about it or even knowing that they have that sense. They know. They have that inherent respect for Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, which I didn't have. And and that's the same amount of knowledge it seems that Prakhar has, what I had back then.
और उस ambiguous past की reference में सबसे key feature क्या है? The marriage of धार्मिक civilizational texts with modern science. कभी-कभी super forceful. अरे ये तो हमारे like.
Okay, we discussed this point already. He is triggered by the fact that our inferior past is being compared with the white man's modern science.
My fear is that this is exactly what will demotivate us from doing something tangibly good, from doing something tangibly better in the time to come.
Okay, two lame points here. I don't know what has civilizational motivation got to do with demotivating economic prospects. This only shows that how less of Indian history he knows, which is why he thinks that there is absolutely no economic angle to when we discuss our past. He thinks it's only about different kinds of puja and archana. He doesn't know that there is a goddamn fucking gigantic economic prosperity that we are also talking about when we are talking about our history. And why would we be demotivated from doing that? just because we are being proud of our civilization now. And remember when he said that this nationalism has come about only in the last 4 or 5 years. So उससे पहले nationalism नहीं था ना, तो तब तुम्हारा tangible benefits किसने रोक के रखा था?
Like, let us be realistic about our sentiment. I'm all for the sentiment, but let us start now.
अरे who is giving him this impression that we are not starting now? He thinks he's some kind of messiah that has just now arrived and is going to explain to us, अरे भाई तुमको economy पे भी ध्यान देना है, and there's no one in the government who knows what he knows. Why is he under this impression that nothing is being done? That we have to start now. Nothing has been started from 2014.
Instead of starting in the past, and for that to happen, all the identity and all the opportunity must flood in the economic domain before it comes to the cultural domain.
Okay, I agree that all opportunity has to come to the economic domain. But I don't know where he has come up with this idea that culture has to be second, economic has to be first. Where did he get this ranking? Where did he get this hierarchy? What's the historical basis for it? Let's bring up USA again. Since he thinks USA's economics and free market just randomly happens out of the blue. When George Washington was setting his country free, why was he pissed with England? Because England was a socialist country and George Washington alone had come up with the idea of free markets. Was that how USA was born? Didn't they do both simultaneously?
That is my limited. So, like, give me an economic, give me space to create the next big, like, social tech startup in India.
तो tech startup को space नहीं मिल रहा है.
Give me space to create infrastructure like the world's never seen.
Infrastructure नहीं build हो रहा है. So I get it that you are studying in USA, you have some job, you are studying a lot of good books, you are watching a lot of great podcasts, but you have absolutely zero knowledge of what the Indian government is doing. Study their policy positions, study what policies they have tried and failed at, and study what policies they have succeeded at, and study what they plan to do for the next 20 years. और ये give me space का मतलब क्या है? तू मांगेगा और one fine morning it will happen. Don't you know that the nation is still filled with fucking socialists? Don't you know that the Communist Party of Bengal lost because it got outlefted by another party, which is not even called communist? They are so communist. Don't you know that we have Nobel-winning economists like Abhijit Banerjee who are just neo-communists, who are saying absolute nonsense like print more money to fight inflation? And you think you will just want something and it will happen overnight?
We've seen enough countless times where countries have gone down and they've risen back up to surprise the world. European, not European, all those countries.
And how has that happened? He again is talking about magic. Have those countries risen up magically? Haven't they risen up because the fucking socialists got kicked out of the government? And have we kicked out the socialists from the government? That happened once when Atal Bihari Vajpayee came to power, even though he was a strong socialist himself in his younger days. Sitaram Goel has written pages after pages incriminating Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Your thinking beyond socialism has started just 8 years back. How much more results do you want?
Nobody else, not the outside world, should be telling us, "Arey, ye to dekho, inhone aise hi jod diya." No. You clean your house. You come with the perfect evidence and the perfect argument.
Why? Why shouldn't the outsider tell you? You don't believe in nationalism. There's no civilizational identity that you can be proud of, that you even think should happen. So why shouldn't the outsider tell you? And why should I clean my house? Why shouldn't the outsider clean my house? Because you are saying there's no nationalism, there's no in-group and out-group. There's no outsider. No one is an outsider. Everyone is your own brother. Listen to them when they tell you what to do.
बंदे ने एक काम अच्छा किया, उसने वर्ड योग निद्रा बार-बार यूज किया. He used the word yoga nidra in the podcast.
Okay, for context, they are talking about Andrew Huberman, who is a famous neuroscientist who has appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast countless times. And in a recent episode, he talked about Yoga Nidra.
I think this is around after 2 hours at the latter half of the podcast of Rogan. But he says I have to call it something else because people will think it is woo. That's where I have a problem. See, यहाँ पे अगर कोई इंडियन ऑब्जेक्ट करता है, वेस्टर्नर क्या करता है? He must be हिंदुत्वा, he must be upper casteist, he must be this, he must be that. No, that is not jingoism. Demanding you acknowledge the source and call it what it is not jingoism.
Yes, it's called decoloniality.
गुरुज जो वेस्ट में जाते हैं, वो ऐसी unnecessary lines बोल देते हैं, योगा इज नॉट हिंदू. तो योगा हिंदू नहीं है तो क्या है?
हाँ, मैंने सुना था ये रिसेंटली, किसी ने बोला था. And it's like, और क्या है फिर वो? मतलब और तुमने फिर कुछ छोड़ा ही नहीं. हाँ
तो क्या हो गया? पास तो एम्बिग्यूअस है. तुम लेके बैठो इकोनॉमिक प्रॉस्पेरिटी होगा तो और इकोनॉमिक प्रॉस्पेरिटी होने दो और योगा को क्रिश्चियन बन जाने दो. What's the problem? You don't have a problem with that, as you said earlier.
Everybody has a national myth that talks about their golden age in the same way. The most obvious example is Iran, which is Persia, right? Iranians and Persia feel like they were the kings at one point and they are fighting this war to reclaim their lost glory.
Okay, this confusion is pretty common, so I'll address it more respectfully. I think this needs to be associated with the idea of a Hindu fundamentalist. So, Fundamentalist means one who follows fundamentals. So, what kind of a fundamentalist a person will be depends on what fundamentals he is following. So, if the fundamentals of your religion is X, Y, and Z, you will be X, Y, and Z. If the fundamentals of your religion are A, B, and C, you will be A, B, and C. So, is he saying the fundamentals of the Iranians are same as the fundamentals of Bharatiyas? That's not the case. So, this point doesn't hold.
If you keep your past front and center, how different can the future be from the past?
Depends on what the past was. If the past was that we were an economic superpower, then that's what the future will be. If, according to you, we are looking only at the past all the time 24/7.
And where did the past go? But this is a purely philosophical idea. A system is only as good as the outcome it produces. What was the outcome that it produced back in the day? Infighting? What did that do? It helped the invaders.
CBSE board and ISC board history line pe aa gaya. This is why he keeps saying past is ambiguous. क्या करना है history का? सिर्फ पैसों के economics के बारे में सोचो. That's his knowledge of history. He thinks we were always a defeated society. The general things that any ISC board and CBSE board pass out believes in. His knowledge had stopped at class 12. Now it's evident. So basically the claim of these modern brown sahibs is that there is nothing to be proud of in your past. What did that get you? Infighting. Or when you prove to them, when you give them historical evidence that there is something to be proud of, they call it jingoism, nationalism, 5 saal se ho raha hai and all, that it's a sudden nationalism phase. So you can't win in any way. It's heads you win, tails I lose.
Right, you have to be careful in formulating your future with respect to the past so that you actually improve upon it, so that you actually become more robust, more anti-fragile, not carry the same fragilities into the future.
I like the fact that he's quoting Nassim Nicholas Taleb, and you should read his book, Anti-Fragile. It's a great book. He's even great friends with Sanjeev Sanyal. And there's even an India Today conclave with both Sanjeev Sanyal and Nicholas Taleb together, where Nassim Taleb vehemently compliments the policies of the government. And Sanjeev Sanyal, does he know that? He has read Nassim Taleb's book. Does he know Nassim Taleb's appreciation for what the government has done? And as far as he said that don't carry I agree that we should be careful. I compliment him for bringing that up. Everyone should be careful about what kind of power they have in society. But he says that don't bring the fragilities of the past into the future. Now here my question is, since he has about zero knowledge of Indian history, what fragilities is he referring to? Does he know what fragilities existed? Does he know exactly why we crumbled or why the decline started? What exactly is he talking about? What fragilities does he know of, I wonder?